I mean, he fills it out as good as anybody. Now that Yoel Romero's not in that division, I think it's safe to say he has the best body in that division, maybe in the whole sport.
What's up, Barnhill family? Welcome back to the channel.
Yo.
So, Nick, last night's main event, Kelvin Gastelum, Jared Cannonier. I expected this to be a great fight. It delivered. Jared Cannonier did just enough to win a very close decision, 48-47 on all three judges' scorecards. And the question really is Jared kind of on a crash course with Israel Adesanya, presuming that he gets past Robert Whittaker in their rematch?
Yeah, and you have to take a man at his word. When he says that he's broke and he needs to keep fighting, it kind of makes you feel like maybe he will fight one more time before he gets a title shot. But I think after that performance last night, even though he didn't get the finish, it was a very clear victory for him. He did enough to win. If he waits around long enough, he'll probably get a title shot. But I don't know. Let's fill his pockets up a little bit in the meantime. I'm sure he's a favorable matchup for a lot of the guys that sit near him in the rankings. And as long as he believes in his skills that he can win and beat those guys, I would keep fighting, keep this win streak going.
Yeah, and he's certainly filling in his frame at 185. Well, he looks like $1 million, first of all. But now, you have to get used to a different body frame as you lose weight and you trim down slowly from heavyweight to light heavyweight and now to middleweight. And he looks like he's really finding his timing. The Whittaker fight, the problem with after that fight that I saw him have was hesitation in actually going. Throw the punches, throw the kicks. The timing was a bit off. He was a bit slow, almost like he was watching the fight instead of participating in it. Last night, he was very disruptive of Kelvin's boxing. When Kelvin comes into boxing range, he wastes no time in letting his hands go. 2, 3, even 4 punch combinations sometimes, all with bad intentions. And Jared did an excellent job of, as soon as he saw that, disrupting it with a low kick or a leg kick or a body kick, and then throwing a couple hands over the top. Yeah. And that disruption and that willingness to pull the trigger is the improvement that I saw from the Whittaker fight into the fight against Kelvin.
Yeah, he looked really good. He figured out exactly what the dangerous areas that Kelvin Gastelum would put him into and figured out how to stay safe in those. I think that Cannonier, you said something about the weight, and I think it's so interesting when you, as a human, if you gain a bunch of weight, your physical activity becomes a lot more difficult. It's right, but it's also just an adjustment, because eventually you do get used to the weight that you carry around, no matter what it is. But when you bring it down, you wind up getting much faster. Right. So your timing goes off and gets shifted in the opposite direction, as opposed to somebody that just gains a bunch of weight. So Cannonier, it's pretty remarkable to see somebody do what he did, which is go basically from being a big, huge, heavy guy to being a light, fast, ripped guy. It's pretty interesting to see, because I would have assumed it would have taken him longer than just a short time in the UFC to make those adjustments and be comfortable with the 185 frame. I mean, he fills it out as good as anybody. Now that Yoel Romero's not in that division, I think it's safe to say he has the best body in that division, maybe in the whole sport.
I certainly wouldn't argue with you there. Yeah. And, you can't talk about a guy that has lost weight and trimmed his body down to be competing in a division where he can challenge for a title and not bring up the elephant in the room, which is Kelvin Gastelum's weight and size. Yeah. Conor McGregor pointed out to us that him and Kelvin are the same height, and he actually has a little bit longer of a reach, 74-inch reach, to Kelvin's 71.5-inch reach. And when you're competing at 185 pounds, it's very difficult, especially when the champion is a long, rangy striker. Even though Kelvin did a great job against Izzy, I see him having a very difficult path to getting himself back into title contention at 185. And it's not that he's not competitive in these fights. It's that I think his true weight class is 170. Yeah. And I really believe, I know I sound like I'm beating a dead horse because everybody's saying this, and I've said it a bunch of times as well, but with the proper diet and the proper amount of time and the right coaches overseeing the process, I believe that he could bring his frame back down to 170. Yeah. the visual test tells you that there is some body fat to lose there, and Kelvin could be a very healthy 170. And look, if you need some inspiration for doing that, look no further than your opponent last night, Jared Cannonier. These guys, like I said, could have been competing. Jared could have been 265 when he was at heavyweight, and Kelvin was 170 at one point, fighting at 170. That's a 100-pound spread between the two of them at one point, and Jared Cannonier was able to slowly and very healthily walk himself down. And I think short of Covington and Usman at 170, Kelvin beats pretty much everybody, and he's pretty dang competitive against those two as well, especially with that boxing.
Yeah, well, he's super durable. And if the Jared Cannonier can't stop him, and, all the guys at 185 that have tried to finish Kelvin can't finish him, I would have to believe that the smaller guys at 170 would have a more difficult time finishing him. So he, even if, he didn't win the fights, he'd for sure go all 5 rounds with those guys. He's just tough as an old leather boot. You're not going to stop Kelvin unless you just, heel hook him or do something like that, like Jack Hermanson. But I do think you're right about that. When you look at Cannonier, there's no fat on the bone. That's a figure of speech, but also literally. There's nothing. When you look at Kelvin, he has a lot of weight that he could afford to lose. Not just for fighting, but for personal health. Obviously genetics play a big role in this, and Cannonier was blessed with some amazing genetics, but the hard work is clearly put in there. Kelvin Gastelum has amazing genetics, and maybe visually they don't look the same, but if he dropped down another 15 pounds, he would not be depleted. He would not be out of, wind. I do think that weight cutting is a bad thing in this sport, all in all, broad stroke. But there are certain situations where there's fighters that absolutely need to consider cutting more weight instead of less.
Well, I look at it as two different things, right? I look at weight, the quote unquote weight cutting gets, a lot of things get thrown into that term. And to me, it's two clear things. One is a long and well-calculated body fat reduction, and the other is a severe level of dehydration, which is super unhealthy and can cause you to have worse performances just by the fact that you took your body to such a dehydrated level so close to the fight that you can't perform. So I'm talking about the former more so than the latter. I think that Kelvin could have a very nice body fat reduction over the next 6 months. His wrestling is spectacular. He's a cardio machine. I think his boxing is better than the champion Usman's at 170, and I think it's better than Covington's. I think it would be a tough fight to win either one of those fights, but at this point, he's got to have a fresh coat of paint. He's losing most of his fights at 185, and albeit they're close fights, and they are against the best people in the division, including the champion, Israel Adesanya, one of the best 185 division has ever seen, not just of this generation, but of any generation, and he was right there with him. But where do you go when you've lost to Robert Whittaker, you've lost to Jack Hermanson, you've lost to Jared Cannonier, and most importantly, the champion Izzy? You kind of need that fresh coat of paint. So I think Kelvin, the best thing he could do, if I'm his manager, if I'm the people surrounding him, advising him, we're not going to fight again for 6 to 9 months. And during that time period, we're going to do a sensible body fat reduction. And Kelvin's going to come out looking like, his opponent last night, Jared Cannonier, shredded to the bone.
Yeah, and a Kelvin 2.0 would be cool to see. And the way you could sell it is because people do jump weight classes, especially in this day of MMA, it's more common. But a 2.0 Kelvin that's returning to 170. He went up, and now he's coming back. And I do think that would be cool. You could sell that. You could package that up nicely, and there's some great fights for him. There's some really good strikers at 170.
Kelvin Leon. I mean, give me a break.
Kelvin
That's an
Leon
awesome fight.
Yeah, I mean, Leon, he's probably going to wait around a little bit longer for the title shot. But I think there's so many fun fights for him that it would be really cool, and it would absolutely help him as far as getting a steam ahead of like who you could potentially fight moving forward. Because right now he just got a bone thrown to him fighting number 3. His next fight's going to be either against a top 10 to 15 guy or an unranked guy.
Yeah, well, he will likely, when the rankings come out on Tuesday, be outside of the top 10 because he was 9, even though it was a very close fight. He may move back to 11, possibly 12. Yeah. I don't think that's reflective of how good he actually is, but it's the reality of the situation. But switching gears to the guy who won last night, Jared Cannonier, Very, very good, very impressive performance. I think that Jared is much more competitive with Robert Whittaker than the Jared that fought Robert Whittaker in his last fight.
I agree.
Still a tough fight for him. Izzy's still a tough fight for him. But Jared seems to be evolving with each fight. And the thing, as I said in the beginning of this clip, is that the biggest improvement I saw was the lack of hesitation.
Yeah.
In the Whittaker fight, it seemed like he was hesitant. This fight, it seemed like as soon as Kelvin came in with those barrage of punches, he was throwing something right back, being disruptive, not afraid to pull the trigger. His cardio looked very good. The couple times Kelvin shot for takedowns and stuff, I thought Jared did an excellent job of defending them. So I think he's kind of on a collision course with Izzy. You know, you have Darren Till out there who Izzy's basically, given the blessing, if you will, to two people, and that's Jared and Darren. And so he wants to fight those two, and I think that bodes well for him. And depending on how Darren Till does in his next fight, Darren could jump the line. But I think that, as Jared Cannonier said, I want to do one. I'm broke. I need the money. I love the candidness, and I think his personality in the sport is underrated. But I think we're going to see him one more time. But I do think eventually all rivers are flowing to a match between Adesanya and Cannonier.
Yeah, I think you're right. Cannonier, he has a couple of things going for him. He's clearly motivated and dedicated to living the lifestyle of a fighter by dropping 100 pounds. He's hungry, which a lot of guys, in the UFC, they don't get paid what they feel they deserve, and maybe they don't make enough money to, live the lifestyle that they'd like to live. So for him to come out and go, look, I'm broke, I need to fight, that means he's hungry.
Yeah.
For him to drop 100 pounds, that means he's dedicated. And, he's already got the physical the genetics and the physical specimen side taken care of. So I think we've got a real monster on our hands. If he shows up with the right game plan and the right mindset, he could beat anybody at 185. I think Izzy would be a very tough matchup for him. But if he shows up right and in the right state of mind, I think he could absolutely be the champion at 185.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see.
Me too.
Well, guys, thanks so much for watching our video. If you've enjoyed the content, a like, comment, and subscribe is always appreciated. It helps us out with the algorithm. And if you like audio versions of our content, we're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. So check us out there and leave us a review if you can. And until the next video, guys, have a wonderful day.
Peace.